Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex. If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. And if you enjoy listening to our show, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button on the episodes. Finally, aside from our podcast, our day job here at Riderflex is to provide recruiting, staffing, and consulting services. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get the information on the services we provide. And now, a quick word from our sponsor and friends at Marketing 360.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Yvette Pagano on the Riderflex podcast. How you doing, Yvette?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on. I'm curious to know about your story, and I want to get into Gentech Scientific and all that, and what you're doing and cannabis. But before we talk business, I want to know about Yvette, the person. Talk to me. Where you grew up, family, siblings, mom, dad. Give me some background.
Sure. So I hail from Western New York State, so Rochester, New York, where I'm born and raised. I am the oldest of 4 children. So my parents had 4 kids in 5 years. So we're all extremely close in age, but I'm the first one. And my parents, but really my dad, my parents are married, but my dad started his own business in 1986. It's a machine shop, metal stamping, turning, milling, that kind of a thing. So we never moved. Like, I was always in the same house. My dad never got transferred or anything. And then I went to Penn State for college, and then I worked for the Ford Motor Company for 5 years, and then I went to business school. And then I moved back to Rochester to take over the family business. And now I'm a Gentech.
So let me ask you, your father, was he a machine shop guy? Like, he worked for somebody else and then he's like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing, and opened up his own shop. What's the story there?
Yeah, it's kind of like your classic family business. So he worked for his dad, my grandpa.
I see.
So my grandfather, Arthur Rogers, he had a machine and tool shop called Rogers Associates Machine Tool. So my dad started working there when he was 14, worked there for about 20 years. And then, family business can be tough. So when he was 35 years old, he started his own shop called Car Engineering and Manufacturing. And
what is the CAR? What's the CAR for?
It's his initials, Charlie Arthur Rogers. So we did do a little bit in automotive, but it was actually, if you have, it was always like, advice for future, entrepreneurs. It's like, well, we named the business in 86 before Google, but when you're going to name your business, kind of think about that whole element of the internet. It was difficult for SEO and such. But anyway, so yeah, Charles Arthur Rogers.
I see. Did he, him and his dad, they kind of, they get into it, and he's like, Dad, I'm going to start my own thing. And then Grandpa continued with his business. So when you were growing up, your grandpa had a machine business and your dad had one. They both had one when you were a kid?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is yes. But my grandfather, he was more of a special machine builder. So, he had customers like Harrison Radiator, General Motors. And so those guys would build, $1 million machine and sell it to General Motors, to insert, some kind of mechanical type thing. My father also in machining, but he really liked the production. So he really liked making parts, over and over again, and more the machining side. So at one point, Rogers Associates was actually a customer of Car Engineering. We sold them some parts for something they were doing. So it was like industries, but we weren't really like going at each other for the same business.
Oh, okay. All right. And so did all siblings work in the business at some point? All 4?
Well, we've all done some time there. I think if you're in a family business, you kind of can't get out of it. But so myself, I worked there for 12 years. I have my next brother. His name's Arthur. He's a professional chef. He has his own restaurant. So he did a little like high school sweep the floor stuff, but he didn't really get into it. my other brother, Alexander, he's still working in the business. So he kind of went all the way, started as an apprentice, worked his way up through management that way. And then my sister, she's actually a nurse and lives in California, but out of all four of us, she's probably the most mechanically inclined.
Really?
So she definitely was on the machines, in high school and part-time, and is a pretty good little production worker. Just being mechanically. So we've all been in and out, but myself and my brother, we did the long haul.
Yeah, you did 12 years. Then now you got into Penn State, which is, it's not easy to get into. Congratulations, got your bachelor's at Penn State. I bet that was fun, huh?
Yeah, that was amazing. Yes. So I'm like a lifetime member of the Penn State Alumni Association. I feel like my life is better because I attended Penn State. So yeah, shout out to Penn State.
Very cool. Now, were you like super conservative in high school and then you went wild in college, or vice versa? What? Give me the youth story there. When did Yvette just go? Did Yvette ever go nuts, or was she just like all at the library every day? And what's the story?
I kind of consider myself like a chameleon, and I kind of try to walk that line of sort of being friends with everybody and kind of enjoying everything. So, in high school, I took all the AP classes, I was a good student. But yeah, I was an athlete and a partier. I played tennis, I did downhill skiing, and yeah, I went to my first, I think it was Jerry Garcia band concert when I was 15. So I'm always, like music, concerts, and yeah, very social person. So I try to be a little bit of everything.
Any major trouble? Ever get any major trouble when you were young? Like, did you have to call dad from the police department and get you out or anything? Anything fun?
So I guess honesty is the best policy in business and in life. So when I was at Penn State, I was smoking cannabis in my dorm room. And
now for the listeners, this is in 95, 96. So
you're still like mid 90s.
You're having to like put little towels on the bottom of the door.
Yes.
And try to, open the window, blow the smoke out the window.
Yes. And so they had a charming policy where they actually, if they smelled cannabis, they called the authorities. So it's like Sunday night, me and my roommate, my boyfriend at the time, were sitting around watching TV, and knock. And yeah, it was a police officer, and I wasn't arrested, but I was charged with cannabis possession. Like a fine. And I had to go to court. My father did come down from New York and was there with me in court, and I did have to pay a fine. And I think I was on probation for a couple of months.
I was gonna say, did you get kicked out of the dorms?
No, I didn't get kicked out of the dorms.
What'd your dad say? Was your dad cool about it, or was he like, what the hell are you doing?
Okay. He just said, my dad took some classes at RIT and stuff, but neither of my parents have like a 4-year degree or anything. And I'm the oldest. And so he said, listen, you going to Penn State, it's special for you, but it's special for your mom and I, and we're not really that upset about the cannabis, but we're a little disappointed you got caught, and you need to be responsible and represent this family well, because this is a nice opportunity for you. And so it wasn't really like the condemning of the cannabis use per se, but more like, yeah, we're a little disappointed, and
I
want you to blow this nice opportunity for
because for him, his oldest kid is in Penn State and he didn't go to college. Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, I totally understand. Your folks still alive?
Yep. Oh yeah, alive and kicking. So
they're still married?
Yep, they're still married. Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, they got married. I think they were 22 and maybe 23. So they've been married a really long time. Yeah.
Congratulations to them if they listen to this episode. Congrats. And they're still living in the same house you grew up in?
No. So we grew up in this as a Northfield Gate. Like I was there like through senior year in high school, and then the business started doing really well. So then when I was in college, they moved into this like mega house that I like never really got to experience. So my sister's like loving it. And so they had that house, I think, for like 11 years, and then they sold. So they've got a condominium in Rochester, it's like right on the canal. And then they
Okay.
own a home in Naples, Florida. So they spend 6 months of
Very
one
nice.
day in Florida. So they're those guys.
Nah, hey, very nice. I totally get it. Naples is great, especially if you go down in
Yep.
January and February. So totally get it. Good for them. Congrats.
Yep.
Congrats to your
Yep.
parents. How about you? Are you married, kids, partners? What's your situation?
Yep. So I'm married to Mark with a C, Pagano. So
Okay.
we actually knew each other in middle school, believe it or not.
What?
Yeah,
Wow. Well, now, was there any
yeah.
fooling around? Any fooling around, holding hands, kissing in middle school? What?
You know,
Anything
it's
there?
funny, not really. Like there was this 7th grade trip to Washington. So we all went to Washington, DC in 7th grade, and we had a little bit of an interaction on the bus. And I was like, oh, this seems like this cool guy, you know. And then I remember we went off and looked at the Lincoln Memorial. We got back on the bus and it was like, oh, Mark Pagano's going out with Beth Fink. And I was like, oh, okay. So you know how it is in middle school. So I'm like, easy come, easy go. And then we went to separate high schools, and that was sort of before Facebook and all that. And so then I moved back home, and he had recently also moved back home.
After college?
Yes. So
what do you like at your folks' house, and your mom and dad's like, hey, Mark's back in town.
Sort of. So he had moved back, I think, in 2004, and I moved back in 2006. And he's now a stay-at-home spouse, but his before all that happened, he's a professional photographer. So he had a studio and a lab, and my mom was one of his customers. And my brother had just recently gotten engaged. And so I moved home, and then my mom's like, hey, I'm recommending this wedding photographer, Mark Pagano. And my brother said, you want to come and check out the photographer? So I went with him, more to be like uber supportive of the wedding and marriage than, trying to be like helpful. And so the three of us, my brother, his now ex-wife, and I went in, and they hired him as the photographer. And Mark's like, hey, if you ever want to, I know you just moved back, if we want to go out sometime and show you the city.
I love it.
So,
for the listeners, by the way, we're recording this on December 7th, 2021, December 7th, Christmas right around the corner. By the way, your story is very similar, I'm sure you know, to It's a Wonderful Life, right? Where the mom is telling what's his name? Oh, guy, what's the actor in It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh, it's Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart. The mom's telling Jimmy Stewart, like, hey, Mary's back in town from college. You should go over there.
Check it out. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
very cool. Very
so
cool.
I better plug, we do have 2 kids, so I better plug them so they don't feel left out. So yeah. So we have 2 daughters, 10 and almost 11. She's actually Christmas birthday.
Cool.
And 8 years old. So I have two beautiful daughters with Mark, and
nice.
That's our little family.
All right. Very good. Well, I appreciate you sharing some of that background. Your personal family history and all that. It really, a lot of that, of course, shapes who you are as a professional. And so I love being able to ask all those questions on the Riderflex podcast. It's interesting, as a recruiting firm, which is our day job at Riderflex, if I'm interviewing somebody as a candidate, I can't ask them any of those personal questions, right? Because you can't do that, right? But on the Riderflex podcast, I can ask whatever I want, which I love.
I know, it's fun, right? Yeah.
Okay, so you worked in the business for 12 years, and then what? Did your dad sell it, or you just wanted out? Walk us into your career there. After you did the 12 years, walk us through your career and transition after that. Go for it.
So, I worked there for 12 years. The succession plan was, I was going to buy the business and take it over.
Okay. That was the plan. Okay.
That was the plan. And, so that's basically what I did. So I was president for a long time. Then I assumed the CEO role. My father retired. Okay. It was, it's a family deal. So sort of inside, kind of a leveraged buyout, if you will.
Okay.
And family businesses can be tough, they can be challenging.
Yeah.
And it was, so I got my brother in there, I got my dad who's retired, I've got myself, there's a non-family member involved, and, their risk appetite and my risk appetite were a little bit, different.
Okay.
And, so we sort of hit an inflection point. And I said, option A, kind of restructure this. I said, or option B, if you guys want to, make me an offer and sell my shares, and I'll, see what else is available. And so they went, with option B. But it was a really kind, considerate, and like loving exit, So I have my attorney, and he's like, listen, he's like, if you get A, B, and C, you sign this thing. And they came with an offer, and they're like A, B, C, and D. And so my attorney's like, sign it. I'm like, okay. So no counter, 90 days later, I was released from all my personal guarantees and had sold my shares. And my brother and the non-family member, they took on a larger responsibility role. And so now those two are running the company, and I'm out of car. And I always tell people, the deal closed, and a week later, my daughter had her birthday party, and everybody showed up, and happy birthday. And so it was an okay exit,
Well, that's,
if you will.
yeah,
which is unusual.
Yeah,
Yes.
totally. I was going to say congrats to your brother and your family and you to get through that in a clean fashion and not have any scars from it. Because you're right, so often that does not go well. What about your dad's ownership? Does he own any pieces of the company anymore, or no?
No, I mean, he holds all the paper, you know what I mean? So he's sort of like the bank, if you will. So he certainly has involvement, influence, etc. But in terms of ownership, it's my brother and Brian Rumsey are the two owners, and then my dad is the holds some paper.
And you guys can still get together for Thanksgiving and everything's fine.
That's right. Yes. So that's kind of why I did what I did when I did. I didn't want to be like, I'll pass the mashed potatoes and you owe me $1 million, So I was like, hey, let's just get out when everybody's, there's still some margin there and everybody's feeling good about it. And so,
all right. And
I was excited.
Yeah. And then what? You took some time off, you traveled, you chilled out. Tell me about that.
Took some time off and traveled and chilled out. So, cool. I did well enough on the sale that I wasn't looking to necessarily get a job, the next week to pay my mortgage for stress, for money. Mm-hmm. But I knew I had to, eventually get back in the working world. Like I didn't do good enough on the sale, but it's like, I'm retired, I've got no other need for income. Right. So I was trying to like walk that line. And so, yeah, I took about a year off. I love skiing and I love tennis and paddle tennis and pickleball. I love like racket sports. So I was like custom of the year at, Tennis Club of Rochester and, skiing quite a bit and doing all that kind of stuff, tons of travel. And so, yeah, I did that for, maybe 8-9 months. And then I reached out to like a professional resume writer. So I'm like, I just want to have something sort of like ready to go. You know what I mean? Like I'm owning this business, so I haven't had a resume in a long time.
Right. You probably never eat. Right.
No, no. Yeah. So I figured, well, let me just have some, so I'm going to start and do some professional networking. And if someone says, well, do you have a CV or resume? I want to have something.
Okay.
And so I reached out to this gentleman who came recommended. And so he said, this is your homework. He said, you go home, you type in like your ideal job on LinkedIn. He goes, you go search around on LinkedIn for like your perfect job. And he's like, you send me like 3 or 4 of those, and then I'll help curtail this resume to sort of meet, your job needs.
Good idea. I like that.
So I do that, and I find a position in Canada. It was like president of a cannabis infused beverage company.
Okay, now let's stop right there. Why were you targeting cannabis? How did the target for cannabis come into play right there? I just want to make sure I pick up on that.
It was a little bit of both. We're only, I'm up in Buffalo now, but I live in Rochester. So, we're like an hour from the Canadian border. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of during like the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And I'm just like, I'm out of here. I was like, people always say like, we're moving to Canada, but I'm like, I could actually do it. You know what I mean? I'm like, we're close. We did a lot of business in Canada, car engineering. So I'm like, I know people in manufacturing, they want me, you know what I mean? I got 2 young, healthy kids. I'm like, maybe we'll move to Canada. So part of it was like legitimately being interested in potentially moving to Canada. Okay. I think I had my settings on Canada versus cannabis.
All right. And were you and your husband cannabis fans? I mean, had you always been like, hey, cannabis is fine with us, and we're recreational or medicinal users or whatever, it was fine with your family? Or you talk to me about that if you don't mind sharing. Yeah.
So at least I'm trying to be more authentic and honest about my lifestyle and stuff like that. So my husband and I are cannabis super fans, super users, like very interested in cannabis.
Gotcha.
No medical no medical problems. We're both healthy, normal people who like to use cannabis.
Yeah. So cannabis and Canada together, and then tie that into what your skill set was from when you were at CAR. That was where you were targeting it. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I see this. So basically then sort of the light bulb went on, for cannabis. So I like see this job. I'm like, oh, cannabis. And I'm like, you can get a job in cannabis. I love cannabis.
Like, cool.
Like, this is
cool.
it. This is it. I'm like, boom, drop the mic, So I'm like, and then I just kept feeling like, well, maybe I won the life lottery, here you are, you're in this machine shop, you're in Rochester, you never think you're going to go anywhere new, do anything different, hey, maybe we'll acquire another machine shop, but it wasn't like these big lofty goals, and then all of a sudden this door opened, and it was like, here's this, market that you're so passionate about, and like you can play, like you can get in now. And so then that kind of became my mission, is just figuring out somehow, some way, how can I transition into the cannabis industry? Who's gonna let me do this? How can I convince somebody to let me work in cannabis? So that really became my why. And my whole push was, I didn't care about title necessarily, salary, location. I'm like, I want to be in cannabis. Like that was my, so I just kept, pushing that as hard as I could. I had some early success, COVID, it's just a little journey in there, and, now I'm at Gentech, but yeah, that was really it. So it was just sort of started out as an assignment, and then that light bulb went on, and then it took me a while to be succinct about it. Like, anybody who really knows me, who's like in my inner circle, I'm like, I want to get into cannabis. Or like, of course, it's like no brainer, no question. Like it was just instant understanding. But then everybody else is like, well, why cannabis? And then trying to articulate a good statement to give the impression that I'm a professional person. I'm somebody you want to hire. I'm part of the A team here, right? But also being a super fan of cannabis. And so I really struggled with that during my career search.
How was your folks okay? Like, did you tell them what your plan was? Your mom and dad,
really.
Are they cool? They were like, hey, whatever.
They're cool, but they're not. I mean, they're not like cannabis super fans. They're not haters. I don't think they really use cannabis. So they're like benign about it.
If you go to your mom's house for Thanksgiving, do you have to like go out on the back porch and kind of just, with the little, do you have to?
No, I just get high before I show up.
And what about your daughters? Like what's the, I think this is a really great question and good for the listeners. What's your advice and counsel to parents who want to be recreational users and they have a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old at home? What do you tell them? How do you share it with them? What's your advice? Go for it.
It's a really good question. It's something I've really struggled with. So I do not currently, nor do my husband, consume cannabis in front of or around our daughters.
Okay.
More that like in school, they've really like drilled into them that like smoking anything is bad, right?
Okay.
So the whole like smoking thing is part of it, that they've got this really negative association with smoking cigarettes, and neither my husband or I smoke cigarettes. So, and they're young, and it's still illegal in New York State. And, I am a mom, so I don't want like hey, we're invite, so-and-so over for a play date. And then it's like, oh, well, that mom uses drugs. And so I have been kind of shielding them, if you will, we have a big house. So it's pretty easy to like hide out from the kids. But I have thought about this and I am, prepared to speak to them about it. And I think once New York State legalizes for adult use, then I think you have the conversation with them and you say, just like alcohol and coffee and cigarettes, this is something that grown-ups do. And if you're, 21 and you can, be responsible and want to try this, and this is something that is, available, if you will. But right
Do
now
they?
we're still being kind of secret.
So they don't know you smoke now.
They don't know.
And there's been no conversations like your 10-year-old, your 11-year-old hadn't said, Mom, you used to, I found some cannabis. Your 11-year-old has not. Now, what happens if your 11-year-old sees this podcast and then all of a sudden her and her friends are at school and they're like, your mom is so cool. Did you see this podcast episode? What happens then?
No, I mean, it's something that we need to address. I mean, it's a real issue, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of calling me out. I mean, it's like, I want to be authentic. I want to stand for cannabis. I want to stand for destigmatization, but yet I have been a little shy about, interacting with it around my daughters. And it's funny because I was talking to this one guy in California, and he's a big cannabis user, and he has kids. And we were at his house and we were smoking cannabis. And I was like, oh, your kids. And he's like, let me ask you. He goes, go ahead and smoke it in front of my kids. And he goes, let me ask you something. He goes, you have your daughters. I said, yeah. I said, would you want your daughters in a room with a bunch of drunk people? Or would you want your daughters in a room with a bunch of stoned people? And I said, definitely with a bunch of stoned people.
Oh, yeah.
But still, I have no problem consuming alcohol in front of them, but I'm not quite there yet with the cannabis stuff.
Isn't that interesting how people will light up a cigarette or they'll pour a drink in front of their kids, but they're still nervous about lighting up marijuana in front of their kids? I think it's because of, just our past and how we were raised and how old we are and, the stigma around it. I think it's still all that, I think, I found it, I live in Colorado, so it's a lot more open and free here, and we don't have to worry about things. And hell, I mean, probably 70% of the people that live in Colorado smoke some,
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, but I found it very interesting when I smoked the first time with one of my 20-year-old sons on the back porch. I still, right? Like even I was 50 years old and they're in their mid 20s and we smoked together, and I still kind of like, wow, this is kind of weird. Like, I don't know if I'm comfortable like doing this with my kid, it's so odd. It takes a while to just kind of break the whole thought process that, so I know it's very challenging. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all that with me. I think a lot of people listening to this episode struggle with exactly what we're talking about with what we're talking about here. I think people struggle with it. I think a lot of adults consume cannabis in some way, in some fashion, sometimes just special occasions, sometimes daily, whatever. I think they do consume it. And I think a lot of them have 9-year-olds and they're like just doing the same thing you're doing, going, okay, how do I share this? When do I share it? Well, blah, blah, blah. So appreciate your conviction around it and appreciate you sharing. Okay. So you move into what you really want to be doing. You're tied to all of your passions, which I think is fantastic. How do you find Gentech Scientific? How does that come about? You've been there since I think April of 2021. You're the Chief Commercial Officer. And by the way, for the listeners, it is gentechscientific.com. In case I didn't mention it, Yvette Pagano can also be found on LinkedIn. You can connect with her there and learn more about her. But anyway, how did you find Gentech, and tell us about Gentech and what they do?
Okay, Gentech is awesome, and this is the best job I've ever had in my life, and I love it. So shout out to Gentech. I'm so awesome. Happy here. Great. It's a great company. So that is first and foremost.
Cool.
So again, I was working with some people in Toronto on the cannabis side. Lauren Gertner is a mentor of mine. So traveling with Lauren, doing that kind of stuff. And then COVID. So we had, plans to, help raise money for a restaurant that was opening in LA. I mean, all this stuff that just stopped. Right. And so I had to pivot to figure out what I was doing. And so what I did is I set my LinkedIn to tell me about any job in cannabis worldwide. Any job in cannabis worldwide, I want to know about it, right?
Okay.
So that was sort of how I saw this thing for cannabis in Arcade, New York. And I'm like, what is this? So I'm clicking around and they're looking for like a sales and marketing director. I'm like, okay. And Arcade is like in the middle of nowhere. So I just assumed it was some type of some kind of grow operation.
Okay.
Just because it's such a rural community. And then I, started clicking around and I'm like, is this like science equipment? And I'm like, what is going on? So I apply for the position, get, an interview over Zoom. And then they're like, okay, want to, bring you in, to Arcade. So it's about an hour and a half drive from Rochester. So honestly, it was like, well, there's no way I'm moving to Arcade. Let me just see what's going on. Cause I'm so like networked in the community. I'm like, well, the worst thing is like, you just see what they have, see what they're doing. Like maybe you could consult with them, like just get in there and like look around, So I show up for this interview. I'm telling you, Steve, like halfway through the interview, I'm like, I'm working here. Somehow, some way, I am working at this place. Like I have never seen more of a good to great situation like in my life.
Nice.
My
dad, the culture, the people,
it was
the
everything.
the vibe.
It was everything. But they've been in business for 25 years. They do so many things right. They've got a great reputation, like all these smart technicians, but it's like, there's just, they were doing their, they have this like binder, with the sales and they flip to the next, and now we have a whole new CRM implemented. We were on HubSpot but there's just so much potential there. And I just kept being like, these guys are having $1 million a month. They're not even trying. And they're doing, I'm like, once we do all stuff. So it was just so exciting. And they're industry agnostic. So about 25% of our business is cannabis, hemp, and actually psychedelic startup labs.
Okay, and when did they start grabbing that as diversifying?
Probably as early as like 2014.
Okay.
So the previous owner, he sold to private equity. So Gentech is owned by Lakeland Capital. I invested with the PE guys, and it's kind of more my journey, how I got to where I am in this job.
So you're an investor in the PE firm that owns Gentech.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Okay. So you're not only the chief commercial officer, but you own part of the company, basically.
Basically, yes. Yep.
Okay.
So that was one of my big criteria, because I did try to get into cannabis initially by being an accredited investor. So I'm like, okay, I can, buy a board seat or buy some kind of, that was really how I tried to do it.
Gotcha.
And those went okay. I did not get the board seats or the strategic advisor roles I thought I would after I made some investments. So that was a little disappointing. But my big criteria was like, I want to bet on myself. I know I'm a winner. I know I'm a money maker. I'm like, I want to bet on myself. So I'm like, I don't want to either give people money and cross my fingers. And I don't necessarily want to work my butt off for a salary. I'm like, I want to bet on myself. So being able to do that was really the end all be all for this position.
Okay. And so now you roll up to who? The CEO of Gentech? I guess, is that so? You report to the CEO there, but you're also, are you on the board? And are you on the board?
No, I probably could be. So I'm not officially on the board. No. So the CEO, his name's Mike Lippa. he's the greatest guy. We get along so well.
Awesome.
And he had worked for Lakelet Capital in a previous business.
Oh,
So
I
he'd
see.
done a
I
a
see.
successful exit for them. So they knew what
Okay.
they were getting. So
I
Lakelet
got you.
basically grabbed Mike and said, hey, we have this opportunity with Gentech. Will you come on? And Mike
Okay, now I
took the
see.
job.
I
And then
see.
they brought me on, and so we're both
Great.
yeah, I mean, Mike's technically my boss, but we work really well together. And like all the stuff he wants to do, I'm not overly interested in, and like all the stuff I like love to do,
Great.
he's not overly interested in.
That's
So
great. That's great.
yeah, we check and balance each other.
How long's the PE firm been in? How long? Because I know most of them.
July of 2020.
Okay,
So it hasn't been too long. Yep. So they brought Mike in kind of right away, and then they had another guy in the role I'm in, and he didn't work out, and then they brought me in, and now
okay, that's very good. Let's go back because I got you off track. Layman's terms, quickly, elevator pitch. What does Gentech do specifically? What do they do? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so what Gentech does is they sell refurbished analytical lab equipment.
Okay.
So the biggest, so they're in every industry. Our biggest customer base, like by aggregate, if you will, are universities worldwide and research centers. But we're literally in every industry: pharma, oil and gas, cannabis, ag. And so the equipment that we have is done for testing and research. So almost like they hate it when I use this analogy, but I'm from the car business. So almost like a used car dealership. So if you're trying to test for pesticides, you would buy science equipment. You'd probably need like an LC triple quad, right? So that machine, you could use that to test for pesticides in anything, in cannabis, in milk, in cherries. And so there's these different science manufacturers that make this equipment. So the most popular one is Agilent. So Agilent makes science equipment. Shimatsu makes science equipment. Syax, Perkin Elmer, Waters, Thermo Fisher. So they make this various types of science equipment. Gentech is in chromatography science equipment. And so what they do is they procure this equipment on the open market. So they find labs that are closing, and they buy all the equipment inside the lab. They've got brokers who look for, stuff on the open market. We buy internationally. So we just got a bunch of stuff in from Spain the other day. And so also our customers can trade in, trade up. So we're constantly getting, so people trade. So we're constantly getting used equipment in through various means.
I see.
Then we've got all these extremely smart technicians. So we've got like 16 technicians. So then we restore the equipment to the OEM standard. So we get it working. And then again, it's big, expensive science equipment. So we'll run, data reports, and we'll be able to show that the machine is, performing at the OEM level. So we do whatever we need to do to get it there. And then we sell it. And so if you were to get, let's say you do a cannabis testing lab and you want to get Agilent stuff, and you've got to be able to do like 6 major tests, in the States to be an accredited lab. So you have to do potency, pesticides, mycotoxins, mold, terpenes, potency. So you've got all these tests you're required to do. And so you go out to Agilent and you're like, I need the science equipment to do these tests. It would be $1.2 million. And it would be amazing stuff, and it would work great. You could come to Gentech. You could get Agilent. Instead of getting like a 1260 Agilent, for potency for $100,000, you could get a 1200 Agilent for potency. Maybe it was used by University of Maryland for a few years, but whatever, it's a 2017. You could get that machine for around 22,000. So if you were to go all in with a complete lab from Gentech, you'd be under 400K. We've done people as low as 250. So it's essentially 70% off of new.
I see. Okay, so if I'm starting a cannabis lab in Colorado and I need equipment, I can call Gentech and basically get
You can call
refurbished equipment
Gentech.
for a lot cheaper. Okay, very good.
Yes, yes.
I
So
see.
that's, and
I
yep,
see.
that's it. So that's it, is buying the equipment, refurbishing
Okay.
it and selling it. And then the other huge part of our business is service. So I
Mm.
always am, making jokes to, potential customers, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, when your machine's out of warranty and Agilent doesn't want to work on it anymore, you can't get parts for your thermo and they won't call you back. I said, you call your friends at Gentech. I said, we'll work on your machine. We'll service it. We'll preventive maintenance it,
Ah.
even if you didn't buy it from us, even if it's out of
Oh.
warranty.
Oh.
So we handle like big service contracts. Like we've got Roswell
Ah.
Cancer, which is right
Ah.
outside of Buffalo. So we take care of all their analytical instruments, even the ones they didn't buy from Gentech. So,
Wow.
so we're sales and we're service.
Do you service across the country? What if you
Yeah.
do you have technicians in Colorado that you can just send out?
We have a sister company in California, but we do installs all over the United States and Canada.
Okay.
So you buy the equipment, and then if you purchase an install, we refurbish the equipment here at Gentech. We mail the equipment to your facility. We schedule a technician. The technician comes in. He unpacks the equipment. Most likely, he's the one that refurbished it here in Arcade, and then
Ah.
he sets it up for you, gets the
Okay.
machine running, provides training, and then we also warranty anything that we sell. So even though it's used, if it does break or have a problem, we'll come out and fix it.
Nice. How big's the company? It's probably, I mean, it's private, so you can't share revenue, but just how many employees? How about that? Can you tell us how big
Yep,
it is?
there's 25 employees.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah,
Does that
we're
include,
busy.
do you use 1099 contractors for service technicians or their
No,
employees?
nope,
Okay.
nope, nope.
Okay.
They're all employees. And I mean, anybody listening, we've got the best tax. So we take like ex OEM. So we've got a guy who worked for Shimatsu
Okay.
for 9 years, and
All right.
a couple of our techs, a lot of them have degrees. So one of our best techs, he's got a chemistry degree from University of Buffalo. A lot of them have electrician degrees. So these guys are smart. And we
Very
don't
good.
break it down by brand, we break it down by system. So it's like we've got a couple guys who are really good at GCs, gas chromatography, and then we've got our mass spec guys, so we kind of break them by their specialty, not by the brand.
I got you. And do you oversee all sales and marketing for the company?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, it sounds like you love it. I love your energy, by the way. Your energy
Thank
around
you.
the company and the industry is fantastic. Let's roll into some summary questions here and some advice for the listeners. I appreciate that overview of Gentech. And by the way, just one more time, gentechscientific.com.
And I have to do one more plug. So anybody
Oh.
out there, if you've got lab equipment you do not want, we are always buying. So please reach out if you're selling or if you know somebody
Cool.
that has analytical lab equipment. We're always looking to buy.
Plus Yvette, you can talk to Yvette, and if you get to talk to Yvette, it's fun because she's super energetic. Yeah, you love that.
Yes.
A couple of things here. I want to ask you, what would you say to, I know that you're not you're not working for a grow operation, so you're tied to the cannabis industry to a certain degree. So I want to go ahead and ask you,
Sure.
what advice would you give an executive that wants to get into cannabis? They're thinking about making the move, but they're nervous or whatever. They're worried about it. Maybe they've worked for Coca-Cola for 20 years and they want to get into cannabis. What would you tell them?
I mean, I would say go for it. I mean, I think, you and I are sitting here having a professional conversation. I mean, I think a lot of that stigma is gone. I mean, for me, it was just, it's hard to get into the cannabis industry at a C-suite level if you don't have any prior experience in the cannabis industry. And it's like this weird like loophole or catch 22, if you will, because I remember I'm like going out and I'm like, but I know how to make money in a commoditized environment. it can't be that much different. I know how to make money in a highly commoditized environment. And people are like, but what experience do you have with cannabis? And it's like, we can put on your resume, or I like to smoke it. It was so tough. And so I would say my advice for somebody who you specifically want to get into cannabis, you got to find some part of that value chain in cannabis that you can play in. So like if you work for Coca-Cola, like what did you do? Were you an accountant? Well, then try to get in accounting. You know what I mean? Oh, you ran a plant. Well, then maybe you're better off going in and seeing if you can help it grow. So I think cannabis is hot and sexy and trendy, and everybody wants to be in cannabis. So it's like, for me, my advice is, the industry needs good people. So you got to figure out what you're good at already, and how can you scale that, or if you're trying to get into cannabis with no experience, you got to tell cannabis, this is what I can do for you. This is the skill sets I can bring to this industry, and I'm adaptable, and I can make money in this industry. So that's my advice.
Okay. Very good. How about this advice for somebody that grew up in a family business? Their dad or their grandpa or whatever, they owned a business. So they kind of grew up in it, right? They worked in it in high school, maybe in college, maybe after college. They ended up becoming an executive in the family business. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
And then they want to transition out, but they start interviewing, and companies look at them and they go, okay, well, she's only worked for the family business. How's she going to change, adapt? She's not used to different environments, cultures. She only grew up in that one thing. I'm worried she won't be able to handle it over here because she, lived in the family business all that time. I'm just going to guess that employers and recruiters look at a resume like that and think that way, right? They look at your resume and go, oh boy, I don't know. Family business, only family business experience. Can she survive like in the real world outside of the family business?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I guess I would say, I worked for Ford Motor Company for 5 years, before getting my MBA, before going into the family business. So I feel like I could at least personally say, hey, I worked for a Fortune 100 company for 5 years. I did extremely well. So I can operate in a, different environment. And then for me, I felt like what I did at car engineering was my report card to society. And I was so proud, because it was record sales, record profits. And, I went out like Jerry Seinfeld, I was at the top of the game when I left. I feel like I had a really good story, and then also great references. So, I mean, everyone who's worked with me, I mean, I don't say I batted 1,000, but most people that work with me, they want to work with me again. I do a good job. And so Rochester's a small town. And so I had amazing references. And so I personally felt very confident that I could do the job that I was applying for outside of the family business shadow, I guess. But for somebody who doesn't have that, if you just were riding the coattails of your dad, then you're going to be in trouble. But a lot of times, blood's thicker than water. And sometimes these children, they work harder than their parents ever did. They feel like they got so much to prove. And so if you're in there in a family business, and you're crushing it, and you've got a good story and you've got great customers and references, and you can say, hey, I accomplished this, then it should be fairly easy to transition.
Yep. Good. Very good. I do advise any listeners if you're young and you're getting ready to go to school, getting ready to go to college, and your family owns a business, I do think it's a good idea when you get out of school, maybe after your bachelor's, to work somewhere else for a while, and then maybe come back to the family business. It's very good to have that experience. It'll teach you some things. I think that's very valuable. So I love how you did that. And then you went on to get your master's at Pepperdine, by the way, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
2 final questions for you.
Sure.
If you could call the young lady coming out of Penn State, she's graduating from Penn State, if you could call her and go back in time and tell her anything based on what you know now, what would you say?
I thought about this question and I'm not really sure. I mean, the biggest anxiety I really had as a young person, if I'm being totally honest, was more on like the personal side. So I was like, I had a boyfriend in college and we broke up, and I wanted to be, you know, in a like committed relationship, but I was having a hard time with that. So I guess I would tell like, 21-year-old Yvette or something like, he's out there, be patient, don't settle. Because that can be hard, when you're building your career to sometimes feel like your personal life isn't as so I was worried I'd never fall in love, I'd never have kids, I worried about that kind of stuff more. I always was pretty confident with my, business skills, I guess. So I would say just, good things happen to those who wait, be patient with everything, keep your standards high with business and life. Try to show good integrity.
How about this last question? If you could put your core purpose in life into a sentence right now, what would that sound like for Yvette?
Global cannabis destigmatization and normalization.
All right. Very good. I think, well, we're definitely headed that direction. I really believe we are. It's, it's getting closer and closer. When do you think it'll go federal across the country? What's your,
I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 years. I mean, I really, I look at this issue like almost exactly like gay marriage. I mean, like gay marriage used to be the biggest deal. And then there was like 10, 11 states that are like, okay, we're gay marriage. And then it just felt like dominoes because society was just like, okay. And I think it's exactly the same. I think it's just, I think society's moved there. I think the Republican Party is starting to really see the tax benefits. That's more of the party of business, if you will. And so they're seeing, I think, good results and not a whole lot of detriment to the societies that have the states rather that have legalized. So I think 3 to 5 years tops, hopefully.
I hope so too. And I'm very, it really concerns me that, in Colorado, you can have cannabis, but then if you drive over to Kansas or a different state, you can get arrested and people are going to jail. People are going to jail 100 miles away from each other, right? You live 100 miles away from each other from state to state. And you can have cannabis, and then in another state, you can go to jail for something. I just think that is absurd.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, yeah. I mean that's crazy. Really my why.
That
it's
is
like
crazy.
No problem to walk in the grocery store and buy a 6-pack of beer. At Sunday at 10 a.m. That's cool. But just so yes, I really think that it just needs to be in a different category. Just along with alcohol, tobacco, coffee, Red Bull, Facebook. They're all kind of things that can alter your consciousness and your feelings. And they're just not, it's not in the right category, I feel.
I always tell my kids, I'm like, it's so funny. The two biggest drugs on the planet that affect people are sugar and caffeine. And, those are just normal.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. All that
I think
stuff.
we should also, I would also vote for, if it was a public vote, I would vote yes for releasing anybody that's in jail for minor possession of marijuana or whatever. If there's somebody sitting in jail for stuff like that, I mean, I would release all those people. I just think that's crazy that they're in there.
Oh yeah. And I know you had Scott Berman on in one of your other podcasts, and I'm also a supporter of the Last Prisoner Project. I was also in attendance at the event he referenced in Las Vegas, which was a big fundraiser for that.
Great.
So that is absolutely the correct issue, and they're doing a good job, at least, bringing it to the attention of the public. And no, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, even when I had car engineering and I did interview, if somebody was convicted of a felon, and it was a nonviolent drug offense, as especially not being hypocritical. I mean, I didn't even consider that as a factor in
Gotcha.
offering employment or not offering employment. So
Love it.
I was trying to at least live that truth. And we didn't have drug testing at car or anything. So I was at least trying to be somewhat consistent with my beliefs. But yeah.
Yvette, awesome stuff. I really appreciate you sharing your story on the Riderflex podcast. Thank you for being on.
It was an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.